you ladies. So I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and go. Okay, I'm gonna go, even though I can't really hear anybody else, but that's fine because you can hear me. Thank you, Chris. Okay. So although, yeah, I don't know where to go to try in my settings, so I apologize if there's a problem there. I don't know how I would get to hear everybody else. We practiced this just the other day, I promise. But anyways, well, I'm gonna go ahead with my part of the speaking points here. And Dina, I just am gonna go by your body language, I guess, for right now, and we'll just work with that. Awesome. So aloha, everybody. My name is Kelly Potts. I'm from Maui, Hawaii, and I am the director and founder of All Are We Water Collective. I'm super honored and stoked that you guys are all here and hopping in on me and Dina's session. I'm also super proud and honored and stoked to be a part of this community of surf therapists all around the world. And thank you so much, International Surf Therapy Organization, for putting on this event, organizing it all. And good job, Chris, you're killing it. But yeah, I'm very excited to share with you my programs, but I'm mostly excited to hand it off to Dina, who has done a lot of work in decolonizing or explaining decolonization of surfing, and now that's becoming a thing. And so I'm very excited to hear what you have to share with all of us, Dina, and thank you so much for joining me as a co-speaker. All right, but I do want to start off by just sharing the inspiration behind my surfing programs, or our surfing programs, now that I'm officially a nonprofit. And it's a direct result of my life experiences. So it all started when I was 12, is when I learned how to surf, and my dad moved to Maui, and I started my professional surfing career at 18 years old. I started to get a small salary, and oh, sorry, I'm going into a different speaker view here. I started getting a small salary and some product, and have been professionally surfing and surf coaching ever since. Being a woman in the surfing industry, I've definitely survived my fair share of challenges. And that led to, for a very short amount of time, me living homeless. And all of my adult life, I've basically only known poverty. So that's definitely a bummer if for a female in the surfing industry, but I have, like I said, survived, which is great. And through all these tough times, it was surfing and being in the outdoors that was my therapy. And those were the times that I found empowerment in myself to continue on, when I would drop into a nice wave and just feel that empowerment to keep moving on. And that peace and being in the outdoors definitely, like, yeah, brought some tranquility to the chaos and the struggle. And so ironically enough, I found a passion for volunteering because I was hanging out with these beautiful Hawaiian kumu, or teachers, that showed me what aloha really means, and took care of me in times of these struggles. And so I realized that family doesn't always mean blood, that it means community and those that look out for you and take care of you. And so that encouraged me to go to school and study Hawaiian studies, which is where I found my love for Indigenous way of life. And I then realized that I wanted to recognize, honor, and give back to Indigenous communities, which is why I started my free surfing clinics in 2010. And that started here on Maui for girls and women. And after great success and popularity and growth with that program, I then took my free surfing clinics to the Pacific Northwest, where I offer similar programs for girls and women for Indigenous communities along the coast in Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. I want to be able to provide those same therapeutic benefits and that empowerment and that peace for these girls and women who aren't so well recognized, and definitely need to receive those same awesome, beautiful benefits. And so after operating as a charity for these 10 years, I finally started a nonprofit last year. Whew. Yeah, I was really excited when that actually came to fruition. So it was a long dream of mine, long goal of mine. So just a basic breakdown of my events. I host several different events that you can always go later on and check out on my website. And each program is similar in how I facilitate them. In essence, these are really awesome like beach festival events where there's a lot of people. There's like 30 participants and 15 volunteers. And we'll open up with an opening circle and an introduction icebreaker game where we can just like interact with each other and get the nerves and the shakes out. And yeah, get to know each other. And then I'll go into a land lesson, and my land lessons are really in depth. I've been teaching, ever since I was 18 years old. And I know that having or giving my students a strategy before they go out and letting them be more familiar with what to expect when we get into the ocean helps their success rate and their confidence getting out into the ocean. And so we talk about oceanography, where waves come from, how they're formed. We get into ocean safety and ocean awareness, which deals with surfing etiquette, how to flow with the ocean's currents, how to use that flow to our benefit, and then how to get out of dangerous situations, of course. And then, of course, the surfing technique, which I call the easy on the body technique, not the pop-up. You can ask questions about that later. And then we go out and surf. If they're in the cold water, we'll go for about an hour. If we're in the warm water, it's like an hour and a half. And then we'll all come in for lunch, and then we'll sit around and eat lunch together. And then we'll have what I call counsel, and I'll pose a question to the group that will help them reflect on their surfing experiences. And it could be a question like, did surfing teach you something about yourself? Or did you have any aha moments? Or, did you have any moments of empowerment? Whatever have you. So lots of ideas there. But my favorite program within all our We Water Collective programs, which, like I said, there are a lot, and we can share about that more later, is the Indigenous Surfer Girls Retreats in the Pacific Northwest. I like that event the most or these series of events the most, because they're for remote communities that for some, they've never experienced this kind of opportunity before. And they take to it amazingly because they're coastal communities and they flow like water. And so the communities that I host for is there's one for the Makah Nation in Nia Bay, Washington. Another is for the Confederated Tribe of Siletz Indians in Siletz, Oregon. We actually surf near Newport. And then the other one is for Taloa Dene Nation in Smith River, Northern California, and surrounding tribes, since there's a lot of other communities out there too, Elk Valley Rancheria and the Yurok tribe. I'm gonna try my best to share a screen with you and show you a little slideshow. Oh, it looks like host disabled attendee screen sharing. So maybe I won't show you my little slideshow after all with all my girlies.
No, you got it. You got it.
Awesome waves. Oh, there it is. Okay, here we go. Let's see if I can pop it up now. And oh, it has it here. Yay. Oh, and so the benefits that I've witnessed through these programs it just brings me to tears each time. Ava right there, I was just surfing with, she had a really traumatic experience as a young girl, and she has found surfing to be her therapeutic outlet. I was able to get one of my personal design surfboards shaped for her here on Maui and brought it out to the Makah Reservation in Washington. And she's just really been taking to it. You could see we just passed by Teresa and Zoe, mom and daughter, who came from the Confederated Tribe of Siletz Indians. They came and learned how to surf together, and Zoe came full of nerves and anxiety and was really scared, but her mom held her hand and she held her head high and they walked into the water together, and she just showed Zoe how to be super strong and brave and courageous and get out of her comfort zone. And they are now currently trying to find their own surfboards and wetsuits so that they can keep surfing on their own, which is just warms my heart. And that's really cool, because I've heard stories a lot like this with a lot of the girls that I've taught in the past. They want their own board, and a lot of them have already gotten their own boards and wetsuits, and they're off on their own and going surfing. And I'm just full of pride. A really cool story was when I first proposed my Indigenous Surf Girls retreats to the Talowa Dene Nation, and I was talking with their community. They were a little skeptical at first whether they wanted to offer this kind of program for their community. I convinced them, and then every year thereafter, they have been full of support, and every time they're always willing to provide more and more each time. And it just warms my heart to know that they have really grown to love these events and see the benefits of these events in their community. I've heard a woman that came up to me and said, this is the first time that I've laughed or cried since I lost my child over a year ago. And that was really sweet. Another girl said, surfing makes me feel free. Another said, I'm more connected to the ocean than I ever knew. And that was really powerful. I don't think about anything else when I'm riding a wave. And isn't that the truth, man? And then, just the little things like, I didn't think I could do it, but then I did it. And I just know that that kind of confidence is going to follow them the rest of their life. And that's why I offer these kinds of events. And then finally, my favorite memory is after the very first event I hosted for this community that you're seeing in front of you. It's on replay, sorry. There was an elder that came up to me from Talowa Dene, and she said, you know what? No one's ever done anything like this for our Native girls. Will you come to my house? Let me cook you some dinner. And after that, my heart was warmed. And I was like, that just brought me right back to that feeling of family isn't always blood, it's community. So All Are We Water Collective is the organization that I work for. It means that without you, there is no me. Without me, there is no you. We are all, and all are we. And that's the basis of our programs, is inclusion, diversity, and equality. So thank you so much for letting me share about my programs with you all. And if you have any other questions about how I got approved by the nations to provide these programs, more details about how I facilitate my programs, or even how they're funded, I'm totally open. If we don't have time in the Q&A, then just contact me direct and we'll be in touch. And without further ado, I want to hand it off to Dina. I hope I get to hear your part, Dina. If not, I'll get to hear the recording later, but I'm so excited. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. And I better stop share now. Thank you so much. I forgot to stop sharing, my bad.
No worries. I wish that you could figure out how to hear me. Because I want to tell you what an amazing, beautiful job you did, and your photos were great, and you had me on the verge of tears the whole time too. And it has such incredible meaning for me, for hopefully reasons that will become evident. But before I go any further, I want to introduce myself. Why Peace Naxioku Isquis Dina Gilio-Whitaker. And
I can't hear anything, I'm sorry.
That's me introducing myself in my native language, which is called Insukchin. I am a descendant member of the Colville Confederated Tribes of Washington State, which is one of the reasons that Kelly's work is so interesting to me, is because she's working in that region. I'm not from that region, we're more inland and up in the northeast, but I was born and raised in Los Angeles. So there's a whole history that I won't go into about how that happens, how I come to be first generation born and raised off the reservation, but it has to do with federal policy in the 1950s and 60s. So I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. I'm near the ocean. I grew up going to the ocean, grew up body surfing and bodyboarding at Santa Monica Beach in the 60s. And in 1980, I moved to Oahu's North Shore, not knowing that I was moving to the surf capital of the world. And that's a true story. It was like happenstance that I moved there. And when you live on the North Shore, like if you don't surf, like you don't do anything because it's really boring. Like if that's what you do when you're there. And so it was natural for me to learn to surf, and I did, and I got good at it reasonably quickly. And I was there at a really interesting time when, for those of you who know surf history really well, that it's a time of this transition that's happening from the kind of the previous North Shore days, before surfing becomes an industry, before surfing becomes a professional sport, before all kinds of things. And it's this transition time, and I'm there, and there's the pipeline underground. Anybody who knows surf history really well on the North Shore will know that time period. I'm part of the pipeline underground. As a girl, I'm one of the few women surfing on the North Shore and one of the even fewer surfing pipelines. So I was living on the beach at Pipeline. In more than one of the houses. I lived in one of the current Volcom houses. They call it the Volcom 2 house. The little small brown house, that was the house that I lived in, and I lived next door to Jerry Lopez. Anyway, I have this whole history about my, how I being a surfer on the North Shore, and so that's how I come to this. And but now I'm actually a scholar. Very long story. I went back to college late in life. I actually stopped surfing for about 25 years and came back into it at age 50, and moved to San Clemente. And I've been here ever since. It's about 11 years now. And I was fresh out of school with a graduate degree, and I was doing research on the Save Trestles campaign, and it became a case study because it turns out that the Save Trestles campaign was not won just because of environmental issues and surfers and environmentalists. It had a lot to do with the fact that Trestles was a Native American sacred site. And so that's what drove my research. And that research has since become a book. Actually, I'm going to just plug the book right now. This is a current book that I have out that came out last year, looking at environmental justice in Indian country. And there's a chapter in the book that's the seed for the book, looking at sacred site protection. And it tells that story of how the village site of Ponhe, i.e. Trestles, becomes one of the major reasons that the Coastal Commission denies the permit to build a road that will have destroyed Trestles. Kelly, it looks like you can hear me. Oh, okay, great. Okay, good to know. Okay, so at this point, what I want to do is share with you a video. I work with a group called Native Like Water. Like Kelly works with Native women in the Pacific Northwest. I work with a group that's based in San Diego. That's a group that works with Native youth. And we reconnect. It's a wellness program, and we do all kinds of wellness and culturally based programs, and we teach them to surf. And many, if not most of these kids are Kumeyaay, who are indigenous to that beach landscape, these beach spaces in San Diego County. And so I'm going to try to share this video. I think I've got my issues worked out. So let me, hold on a second. Wait a minute.
You got it? You're all loaded up, Dina?
Yeah, let me share my screen first. Can you see it? Is my screen visible? Yeah? Oh, good. Yay. We were having technical issues around this, but looks like I got it worked out. Okay, so I'm going to share this video. It's really quick.
I created Native Like Water to reintroduce the coastal environment to the indigenous youth of San Diego and that have been moved back from the coast into the mountain. It's crucial for us to be back in our natural habitat and helping to recreate the narrative which has been void for many years of our place here on the coast. We are one with water, we are like water, we flow like water. Okay, you don't want it sideways, okay, because there's more surface it'll pick up. So every time you go out, you're gonna go straight at stuff. Native Like Water is a program for Native American indigenous youth. It's to reaffirm and reestablish our connection with the ocean, with the waterways, and the relationship with ourselves.
Surfing to healing, it's definitely an outlet for me. I'm from the Kumeyaay Nations and La Jolla Vandalist Innu Indians. We are coastal tribes, so that's where I find my connection to the ocean. We went from the ocean down to the deserts. Do you have everything you need? Yeah, I got it. Woo, beautiful day. It's kind of hard for me to get to the beach. It takes us about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get here. The sensation I get when I'm around the ocean, it's really indescribable. It makes me feel good, so that's why I keep coming back.
All right, guys, here's you guys' paddles. You three are gonna go with Dan. We'll meet you down at that little spot. The removal of Native American coastal folks from San Diego was a process that began when the Spaniards came through, and through the development and thievery of the coastal properties within San Diego. A lot of different groups who've been displaced by real estate and expensive coastal property. And without having any species connected to their natural habitat, you'll have extinction. So the coastal culture that you see now is not really indigenous coastal culture, which came with the land for thousands of years. A lot of it has been appropriated. Surfing is one example of that. Surfing was the indigenous tradition. It was a lifestyle. It was something that we practiced every day for thousands of years. A lot of it is not documented, so we look to the stories of Hawaii or the stories of Peru and see what kind of role surfing played within their community. In Hawaii, it was the young ladies that were the first surfers, that would ride the waves, and that would be a part of the courting system with young men in that coastal environment. So seeing these ladies gracefully glide along the ocean is something very spectacular. It's like as queenly as you can be in that state of connectedness to earth, to your community. We're talking about courting, we're talking about creation. So surfing is an excellent way to reconnect youth to their natural habitat and strengthen their relationship with their own identity.
Surfing to me, it really means a huge middle finger to the stereotypes that surfing all has, because I'm getting away from the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, tan, masculine-dominated sport, and I'm getting out there as a minority myself. I feel like I'm making my ancestors really proud when I'm here at the ocean because they pushed us back, and now I'm standing here strong.
I want to just say thank you guys again and show my gratitude, not just to you all, but to the Creator for allowing us to be here. I always just point out that we're the ancestors' wildest dreams, so they never thought we would be probably back on this beach. These coastal areas, whether it be San Diego or Los Angeles or Santa Barbara, this is our natural birthright to visit, to live, and to recreate. We are here to reclaim that surf identity, that indigenous recreational lifestyle.
Okay, well, let me get rid of that before it does something weird. Okay. Chris, was that okay? Could you see it good?
It was good.
It was
It worked.
smooth.
It worked.
Oh,
It worked.
oh, excellent. I'm so glad. Okay, so I will tell you that I am the surf auntie in that group. That's my official title, surf auntie. So I wear that. I wear that with pride, that title. I mean, on the website, Native Like Water, I'm listed in like the core faculty or something as surf auntie. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of share with you more of the work that I do as a surf scholar. I teach at Cal State San Marcos. I'm a professor of American Indian Studies at Cal State San Marcos in San Diego County. And so in one of the courses that I teach is American Indians in sports. And so a lot of what I teach in there is some of this critical history of surfing and what it, how it originates in Hawaiian culture, and, and we dispel some of the myths around that. I also work with the Institute for Women Surfers in this world of critical surf studies. There's so much to tell, and I'm going to have to breeze through it as quick as I can. But I came into this world of critical surf studies about 6 or 7 years ago, after meeting Corey Schumacher, actually, just by accident on a street corner in San Clemente. And I'm reading a book called the American Surfer. It's about radical surf culture, very heavily academic book that's a very critical look at surf history. And so I start reading all these different texts that are a whole different take on surfing and surf culture, and a lot of it is history correctives. And so I start thinking about, well, the problem with one of the problems with surf history is that, for over 100 years, surf history has been written by white guys, white dudes, surfers, journalists, and they got a lot of stuff wrong. And beginning with Alexander Hume Ford and Jack London at the turn of the century in Hawaii, when surfing was used to colonize Hawaii. And so part of this literature is recasting the history and recontextualizing history or surfing within these broader histories, the way that historians write and talk about this stuff. And so one of the ways that I enter the conversation is by understanding how surfing begins in California in 1907 with George Freeth. Again, anybody knows their surf history, this is deep history here. And it's been written as this feel-good history. George Freeth, this native Hawaiian guy, comes here and he gets hired by Abbott Kinney in Venice Beach and Henry Huntington, and they hire him to sell beachfront property. Very interesting history. And he goes on, and George Freeth goes on to single-handedly pioneer the art of lifeguarding, and this opens up this whole new world for a surf culture to become implanted in Southern California, and it helps sell all this beachfront property, and people start moving to the beach, and it's the deliberate creation of a beach lifestyle, a beach-centered lifestyle, and surfing is deployed in that project. And this is why we really have the history, the culture that we do in Southern California, and surfing which is so central to all of that. It was intentional, it was not incidental. But the piece where I come in it from, as somebody as a native studies person, somewhat historian, like understanding the conditions of possibility for that being, and that's because and what that piece is, that all of this happens on the heels of a very profound and active genocidal process. So there's this, the 50 years before 1907, when George Freeth gives his surfing demonstrations on the beach, is a institutional commitment in the new state of California to eradicate the indigenous population, right? It's a stated policy, extermination. And so there's this ethnic cleansing that happens for 50 years. This entire 50-year period, there's this extermination process. And so it's ethnic cleansing, and it creates the conditions of possibility for surfing, a surf culture, a beach-centered lifestyle to occur in Southern California beach landscapes. And so these are important pieces of information to fill it in. This is context, how we understand surf culture. History does not start with white people. It does not start with settlers. It starts way before that, and all the things that lead up to now. So I always say that the present is always constructed by the past, and yet we are not taught that as in our education. So that's how I come into this conversation. I've done a lot of writing about this. I've written pieces online. I've written a book I should have pulled the book out. There's a book called Critical Surf Studies Reader. That's a groundbreaking book where a lot of these critical perspectives on surfing have been published. And so this is all about, for me, it's all about the process of unerasing Indigenous peoples in their ancestral territories, because this is what California is. California has been created by these processes of erasure and invisibilizing Native peoples. And so this is my commitment to undoing that history and bring a much more accurate history as a project of social justice and awareness. And so this is part of like decolonizing surf culture by bringing that critical awareness and restoring Indigenous peoples to their home, their ancestral lands. The reason I showed you that video is because it compresses so much important information about the relationship of Indigenous peoples to their landscapes and how important that is, and why surfing can be a vehicle for doing that. As you saw with Cakes, Alexis Cakes, they call her Cakes, and she talked about bringing being Kumeyaay, and how they were originally coastal people for thousands and thousands of years. They were coastal people who got pushed off, and in broad time, the broad spectrum of time, that's recent history for them to have been pushed off their lands only 200 years ago is recent history for them. So the role of surfing to bring them back, to restore them to these places in an albeit imperfect way is really critical and important. Let's see, what else can I say? So for me, this is about creating an ethic of accountability, right? So this is the work that I do as an Indigenous studies scholar, is bringing this aspect of truth telling to American culture and broader understandings of history, and a sense of accountability, a sense of American accountability to that history. And just like, some scholars are doing the same thing in the context of Hawaii. Isaiah Walker is a perfect example, debunking some of the myths that have been created around Hawaiian surfing in that context. And so restoring Native people, especially youth, into their Indigenous landscapes, their ancestral territories, is, to bring this back around to surf, to surf therapy and wellness. This is a healing process for them, to bring them back into those places that they have been systematically dispossessed from. I mean, this is to live in a culture, to be from an Indigenous culture that's coastal, that has been so thoroughly colonized and commercialized and blocked off, the access of it blocked off, is to re-traumatize people. So this is a way to think about it for Native people who have been systematically dispossessed, to be in these spaces and to be in places where there's so much development, and and this is not an exaggeration, almost every time a shovel goes into ground, ancestors are dug up. That's it's a incredibly serious problem for coastal Southern California indigenous people. So the re-traumatization of that by having ancestors dug up for commercial purposes, and it's a whole other story that I won't get into, but to illustrate the point about trauma and how surfing and can bring a sense of wellness, a sense of healing to these communities, is I don't think it can be overstated. So that's just a very important point. One of the last things I'll say about some of the work that I do is that for some of you who are in California, you might know that a couple of years ago we had AB 1782, which is the bill that made surfing the state sport of official sport of the state of California. Long story short, I was able to help craft some of the language of that bill. And it was pretty remarkable because in that bill, we were able to insert language that first of all, acknowledges surfing as an indigenous sport that comes from Hawaii. And then second, in its skeletal form, the authors of the bill named all these iconic surf spots as, part of surf history in California, like, Rincon and Malibu and Steamer Lane and Huntington Beach and Trestles. And I was able to write the language in there that said, these are indigenous homelands and they have names. And we did the research about the indigenous place names of those places, and they got inserted into that bill. And then we were able, and the tribal nations associated with those places as well. And the third piece of that was that they acknowledged Trestles and how Trestles was saved. And we were able to point out that Trestles being the site of the place of a Native American sacred site, an ancient Native American sacred site, and how that contributed to the destruction of it through this toll road, how Trestles got saved because it's a Native sacred site. So it was a huge accomplishment because ultimately what it represents, all of the language in that bill represents an indigenous land acknowledgement. I believe it's the first legislated indigenous land acknowledgement in the country. And so I think it's something to be proud of, and it happens in surf culture, in the context of surf culture. We got to take our victories where we can get them. And, I think surfing, surfers have something to be proud of with that. So I'm going to stop there. And I think that we can open it up to conversation.
Dina, very quickly, everybody on this in the chat box, if you could respond, who wants to take American Indian Studies at California State University with me? Dina, we're all going to sign up for your course because frankly, 35 minutes with you is not enough time anywhere, anytime. Gosh, the impact.
A lot to talk about.
Well, the impact that you have made through your actions. It's one thing for you, your experiences, but then for you to put those into action. I've got a few questions here, so I'm just going to throw them out. You might have already answered these on Whova, but obviously not everyone's on Whova, and I'd like to respond here on the live section. So what is the major roadblock for American Indian youth to engage with the ocean and surfing? And do American Indian youth historically have a strong bond with the ocean and surfing in particular?
Well, it depends on, in Southern California here, like the video showed, the Kumeyaay people were coastal people, and they were also desert people. So they were coastal coastal Kumeyaay. There were also Luiseño people who used the coast in southern, like San Diego and Orange County. Here in Orange County, the native sacred site that is Trestles and is called Panhe in the language of the Ahashiman people. So this is the site of those people, Ahashiman. You go further up the coast into LA, then it's the Tongva people. Further north is the Chumash. Then, you just go further up the coast and there were always people occupying coastal spaces, at least here in California, well, everywhere. I mean, everywhere that you go, at least in the US, people lived at the coast, and much like today. And so the processes of colonization have systematically dispossessed people from genocided them, and then kicked them off their lands, relocated them, caused all this incredible cultural disruption. And so coming back into those spaces can be really hard, as we see in Southern California. And here in California, we have something called the California Land Act, California Coastal Act, that was passed in the 1970s, that was passed to protect public access, number one, and also to protect the environment. And it's one of the most unique and powerful laws in the world, not just in the country. They don't have anything like it in the East Coast, for example, where all beachfront property is private. And so you cannot have access to most beachfront in those spaces. But in California, we do, because it's mandated by law. So that's all we have. Like for Native people that have been pushed inland for that coastal real estate, they most of them only have public access to their ancestral homeland. Although there are examples of some of that land being given back, and there's an example in Northern California, particularly with the Pomos. It's different in other places, like where Kelly is working in Oregon and Washington. Some of those tribes have retained their coastal lands, like the Quinaults and the Silettes and the Macaws and others. So for those who have been pushed off their ancestral lands, they face the same kinds of difficulties of access that other people who live in inland communities and who are disadvantaged face. But it has a different meaning. It's sort of like there's like a wound, there's a soul wound there for them. Like, it's not just it's messed up because we don't have public access. It's that this is our homelands and our ancestors are buried there and we don't have access to that. So it's this, again, trauma. It's a framework of trauma for them. So what was the second question?
Well, we've got a couple more. Kelly, do you want to answer that real quick? You're on mute, Kelly.
Yeah, I'm having to listen through my app, but when they're both going at the same time, there's all this reverb. And also the tsunami warning test is going off right now.
Okay, maybe I'm going to have you answer in Huva.
And I'm not able to hear you, but am I responding to the same question that you had asked?
Just the roadblock
Chris?
for, you can't hear
or
me.
Or is it a different question? I'm going to have to, yeah?
Yeah.
No? Yeah. Sorry, you guys. Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, the communities that I've gone into had never had anything provided like that before. Almost done with the tsunami warning. Okay. There was even someone that came up and asked me, why here? Why are you providing this here of all places? That was in Crescent City in Northern California. And I mean, I'm looking around at the indigenous community that lives right there. That's their front yard. And I'm looking at that person like, are you crazy? This is their land. You're surfing in their, so no one had provided that kind of experience for their community before. And, now that I have, it's, it's just taking off and everyone's really loving it and going for it and getting their own equipment, which is great. But I mean, in so much less philosophical and, academic terms, I think it just is a matter of people recognizing that the places that they surf have people, that's someone else's home that came before them. That's their land and that's their ocean, I mean, it's all our land, it's all our ocean, but that is their home. And if we can recognize that and be able to provide these kinds of experiences, if we have the willpower and the means and the resources, then we can make that kind of stuff possible. And it's been happening. So I don't know if that's a valid answer.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So we've got just a couple, like 5 minutes, but Dina, this question, many view surfing as having gone from radical outsiders to mainstream, conservative, and even corporate over the past decades. How can we combine an incredible reach and voice of being adopted by the mainstream with a more prominent activist community in support of those currently treated as outsiders?
Yeah, why? Like that's a huge question, and it's really complex. I think it always comes down to education and getting our voices, and getting alternative perspectives into the places where they are seen and heard. And I will say that the last few years, like in this world of critical surf studies, for example, it is infiltrating these spaces. I also think that the current political landscape of this year with the Black Lives Matter movement has had a huge impact. I mean, Surfer Magazine did a whole, I don't know, I mean, Surfer Magazine now just recently went under, right? I mean, they went out of business just recently, but that last issue that they did a whole piece on recognizing the indigenous places of surfing. It was radical for a publication like Surfer Magazine to do something like that. It's so out of their, the realm of normal for them, and that, a lot of credit. I've yet to see, Surfers Journal do that. So it's like, keep having, and I will say that I've been published in the Inertia. When I started writing about this, that was, I think, the first place I published anything was in the Inertia. And that was, kudos to them for publishing my radical, my provocative perspective that got highly criticized, not surprising. But we need to keep saying it, keep putting it out there, keep getting published, keep going to these conferences, keep having conferences. I think, organizations like your organization is, it's another example of how surfing is really evolving. Surf culture, these narratives is evolving in these really sophisticated ways. And I think that train's left the station. So, I mean, I would say in answer to that question, I think we're doing it, and we're doing it successfully. So, all these different ways that we can imagine surfing as being a force for social change, like really productive social change, social equity, racial equity, all of these things, it's happening. So, and I just to have an organization, for you to even be having this conversation, to be inviting me to have this conversation is a step in that direction.
Okay, 50 minutes with you, 60 minutes with you, 60 days with you is not enough. If you guys aren't reading this, I don't know what you're doing. It's just so impactful. I've got like a couple more minutes, And then we've got a 2-hour break to everybody out there who's listening, who's still awake. There's lots of people who have, it's the middle of the night for them. They're going to sleep. But for everybody listening, we've got a 2-hour break. So I'm going to ask this last question. For both of you, what is the appropriate way to pay respect to Indigenous peoples and land?
Learn about land acknowledgements. That's a first step. It's by no means the end all be all. This is only a beginning about, bringing this broader awareness about the fact that in the United States, all of the US is Indian country. It's all Indian land. Most of it was taken illegally. And so now we have this practice that's becoming much more widespread. This land acknowledgement practice. There's all kinds of stuff out there where you can now learn how to do a land acknowledgement, become aware of whose land you're living on, wherever. If you live in the US, do your homework. Do your due diligence, learn who the Native people are, because I guarantee you, they are not extinct. They are still there, whether you know it or not. They are still, there are still sacred sites, places that are important to them. There are burials, there are religious sites. Everywhere you go in this country, they are there. And just because the historical narratives have been manipulated and erased, or our presence as Indigenous people have been erased, doesn't mean that we have actually disappeared, because we never have. And so it's only because as Native people, we've been able, part of our resistance and our resilience is changing these narratives and, becoming professors and becoming teachers and, entering all the mainstream spaces of dominant society, that we're able to, bring this awareness forth. So just learn whose land you're on, and learn how to do a land acknowledgement if you do any kind of public speaking or public events, and advocate for that at the local levels. That's one really simple way.
We can't hear you, Kelly. This oddly went on with all of your wisdom and knowledge, both of you, with all of the mechanical errors that we are all expecting because it's Zoom and it's technology and it's the internet. I will never be able to thank you enough. I say this a lot. Thank you from the bottom of the ocean. As you continue to educate us and we continue to learn from you, I feel wealthier. I feel richer, because I'm changing the narrative of what that looks like. And obviously 2020 has changed the narrative. Our wealth is our health, but to know the history of why I can stand on the land I stand on and surf on the breaks that I surf in have changed my experience surfing. It is spiritual now. It is far more meaningful. And to you two amazing, beautiful, brilliant women, thank you so much for what you're doing. We really appreciate you being with us today. Have a good afternoon and good evening and good morning to everybody else. See you in 2 hours. Thanks, ladies.
Yay. Thank you so much for having us. This has been awesome. Good job, Dina. That was super educational. I love you. That was amazing.
Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Aloha.
Mahalo.
Let's go surf.
You.